Good morning, everyone. My name is Jay. So glad you're here with us this morning. And I'm continuing in our series. We've been in a series, The Way We See. We've been talking about different worldviews and paradigms that exist and are influencing us in various ways and how we think about what our life is for and what it means to follow Jesus. So we've been looking at all kinds of different worldviews and paradigms and how do those relate to understanding who Jesus is. And many of you have made fun of me in the hallway and other places. This is my exciting opportunity to use all of my philosophical thinking. So I hope that you've enjoyed it, because I have. It's been fun for me, and I'm not sure you've enjoyed it quite as much as me. But it's been a great series to kind of think through maybe even some of the ways that you can see yourself being influenced, but also relating to people who may or may not have a life with God or are considering a life with Jesus. So, to set up what we're going to talk about today, I wonder, have you ever attempted to persuade someone of what their favorite flavor of ice cream should be? Like right now, just think to yourself, what is my favorite flavor? You go to the place, and there are all the things on the board, and you know what you gravitate toward, right? You gravitate toward whatever you gravitate toward. And imagine you turn to your friend and say, hey, this is what you should get. What is the nature of that argument? Like, for example, who here would you just say, I'm pretty straightforward, it's chocolate. Things that are chocolate get my attention. Who are those folks? A few of you? Okay. Don't worry, there's no twist here. They're like, what's he gonna do? There's no twist. Okay, so we have chocolate people. I mean, this is gonna be a little sad for me, but who are vanilla? Like, vanilla's fine. I just wanna start here. You're wrong. Anyway, okay, so like those would be on the ends of the spectrum. The chocolate and the vanilla people argue. Would anyone, is anyone correct like me and would choose things that are more savory, like the caramels, the sea salts? That's right, yeah? These are the right people. And you try to persuade someone, man, don't you love chocolate? Don't you love caramel? Who are like fruity types, like strawberries and raspberries and... Anyway, so, okay. Obviously what I'm doing right now, if you're not picking it up quickly, is ridiculous. I don't know if you've attempted to persuade someone of favorite ice cream. It generally is ineffective. And like people have different tastes, they like different kinds of things. They tend to move towards certain kinds of flavor profiles, etc. Right? That's just how it works. Are there any pistachio people among us? Oh, why even have ice cream, guys? Just skip the ice cream. If you're gonna get like a nut flavored thing, anyway, okay. Moving on. See, I'm still trying to do it. Okay, so the point is there's something strange about that, the nature of that kind of conversation. It's similar when you think about movies. Like movies that you love, that really mean something to you. You try to say that to a friend. You try to say that to somebody. I'm kind of a snob. I would be of the perspective that our taste in movies is just degrading, like horribly culturally. Yes? Okay, you and me, we're both snobs. Okay, so like Marvel movies, like seriously? Seriously? Like seriously, like we can't come up with like new material? We're just gonna keep, okay, anyway, so the limitless sequels, like the Fast and Furious, like 27, really? And I'm obviously in the minority there. Like, apparently, people like these things. People are filling theaters. I think that's insane. And to have that conversation is kind of a non-starter. Like, how do you have that conversation? How do you people have different preferences. That these are the things I like about movies. These are the things that, music, it can't be done. I mean, it's clear with just a plain reading of the scriptures that God is for hip-hop. It's just a plain reading of the Bible, like the way that the Bible works in rhythm right at the creation of the world. So, I mean, this is obvious. Maybe it's not obvious to you. Okay, so all silly conversations. I've even watched people try to argue about what color is best. Like, what is my favorite? This is my favorite color. Let me tell you why. Like a blue sky shows God's preference for blues. Or people are nodding like, this is good. I like this sermon. Okay, these are silly conversations. They're silly conversations because they're inherently subjective. They're inherently subjective. They relate to the person's preferences. And because they relate to your preferences, they're not the kinds of things that we would believe in general that you can persuade people of. Like, it's fine. If you like raspberry, that's fine. If you like chocolate, crazy. If you're going to go crazy and have chocolate raspberry, fine. You put some things together. That's fine. You're allowed to have any number of preferences, and obviously, if you go get ice cream, you can tell there are a lot of preferences. Now, there is a worldview that would make the argument that all of truth sort of works this way. Truth is subjective. In the same way that you choose a color or a type of music or a type of movie or a type of ice cream, in the same way, that's kind of how truth really works in the world. It isn't objective, it's subjective. And it's based on what sort of works for you, what doesn't work for you. And this worldview could be generally put under the umbrella of postmodernism. And postmodernism is what is deeply influencing the Western world right now. Whether you're aware of it or not, you are being deeply influenced by postmodern thinking and logic. And postmodernism, of course, since it's called postmodernism, is emerging from a worldview that would be known as modernism. And modernism would have been deeply informed by what we talked about in one of our first talks, being naturalism. The idea that we can study the world and see the mechanistic properties of the world, harness those mechanistic properties to get certain kinds of things done. And modernism was highly successful. We built machines. I mean, I was in, this week, actually over the last 2 weeks, but this week I was in 4 different cities across the country. I was in Phoenix, I was in Houston, I was in DC, and I'm back here in Denver. I did that this week. If we did that 100 years ago, 150 years ago, that would be like the better part of a year traveling, right? Like that, and like the Oregon Trail. I would have died of cholera or something, right? Like, and we would have, that was for the old people. Okay, so, like, it's amazing what we can do. In modernism, harnessing the power of science, and you could see, as we've talked about, sort of influences deism, the idea that, like, maybe there's a God who made the world, but he's not there. Harnessing that power made a modernistic world that's done incredible things. Computers and air travel and medicine. People are living longer than ever. The ability to understand the components of the human body and to build synthetic drugs and all kinds of things that we can do are enabling and enhancing people's lives. That would be modernism. But what also happened with modernism was unspeakable evil. Because we were able to harness the power of the world, we were also able to kill people in ways that we could have never imagined possible. And armies were formed. We have 2 world wars that ravaged the world. People were killed in ways that we could have never imagined. Economies have been formed under the power of modernism that have oppressed the poor in ways that we could have never even conceived of. They've made it so that people can't climb out from wherever they are. We can use evil to surveil people or manage them in ways we never imagined. And really what modernism revealed is that we are not inherently good. When we have the ability to harness power, the human race will generally use that for good things and for bad things. And on the heels of 2 horrible world wars, and who knows how many other unspeakable wars and horrible things, a number of other worldviews emerge, and we've talked about those worldviews a bit. Things like nihilism, where people are like, what's the point of anything anyway? That sort of surfaces out of that soup of problems. We talked about existentialism, we talked about Jean-Paul Sartre, if you remember, where Sartre basically starts to say we're supposed to just carve out our own existence out of this mess of things that are happening because the worldviews that are being given to us, the power that's being given to us through modernism isn't sufficient. Humans need to find a way. And this idea that there's some kind of a life with God is a fairy tale. You got to build your own world. And that's moving us through most of Western philosophy, what we're describing right there, and worldviews. And of course, last week we talked about Eastern mysticism, which is influencing our culture greatly right now, as people are grasping for other ways of understanding how the world works. And so that brings us all the way up to this point, and that's where postmodernism, as kind of an umbrella framework, emerges. Postmodernism shows up, and strangely enough, most postmodernists were staunchly opposed to existentialists. And we could talk about that some other time, maybe even tomorrow. A guy like Michel Foucault would be one of the key people who makes a case, French philosopher, for what would now be known broadly as postmodernism. Jacques Derrida, different kinds of philosophers who are basically making an argument that this idea that you even sort of carve out your own existence is fatally flawed. And it's fatally flawed insofar as there is no actual truth, say postmodernists. They're simply subjective, like frameworks by which you live your life. That truth is a lot like choosing your flavor of ice cream. Like you're allowed to just choose whatever thing you want to choose that's going to be most helpful to you in your life. Let's not pretend as though there's some kind of larger frame. And this language shows up in a lot of what we would see in universities today. Many different categories that we would have understood as objective are now read as subjective. The most obvious and direct and clear one would be in relationship, for example, to biological sex and gender. For most of the history of the world, there are men and there are women, and we can know the difference based on their biology. Well, it's really it's a major social experiment. If you did not know you're a part of a social experiment, you are. We're in the middle of a major social experiment for maybe one of the only times in human history. We're saying, well, what if those categories are not defined biologically? What if those are subjective, like raspberry ice cream or caramel ice cream? And what if biology indicates certain kinds of things about like how your body works, but isn't necessarily describing how you might identify yourself? There's no meta-narrative out there. We can move these categories around. We can say what we want to be. By the way, we can create other genders in between. A lot of that way of thinking is being informed by the postmodern critique of the modern world. And the postmodern critique of the modern world is saying, I don't know, I'm not sure that harnessing all of this energy, making it objective, has made us better. I think we're worse. I think it's all surfaced as the fact that we're using, and here's the key, we're using knowledge and truth as power to attack and oppress one another. And the only way that that's going to change is we stop pretending that the world is objective as you make it out to be, and we allow people to have permission to subjectively carve out their own existence. Does this make sense? If you can't see this in our current cultural moment, I don't really know how to persuade you. It's so prevalent, it's so obvious. And much of what comes toward you as an adult, or specifically a young adult or a teenager, would have been unimaginable 150 years ago. Unimaginable. The idea that somehow you get to form your own identity outside of your own biology, outside of your own family, your own country, and some set of moral norms has been unthinkable for most of human history. Unthinkable. And yet, it's commonplace now. That's just the way you live your life. And for what it's worth, I think it makes some sense. If you had lived through 2 world wars, you're in like Western or Eastern Europe, and you've had multiple generations of your family crawling around in ditches or stuck in concentration camps, multiple generations of your family, you might say to yourself, wait a minute. These people were killing each other because they believed that they knew what was right and the other people were wrong, and that gave them the right to kill one another, to torture one another, to remove one another's humanity. I don't know. I feel a little allergic to the idea that somehow people know what's right and wrong. That makes me anxious. That makes me nervous. What if we could be a little bit more tolerant? What if we could be a little more gracious? What if we could make a little more space for people? In a pluralistic world, which is what you and I are living in now, where there's lots of different worldviews that surround you, shouldn't we be equipping and training specifically young people to live in the world graciously, open-handedly, kindly, not taking the view of debate or argument or persuasion, but instead the view of open-handed kindness? I don't know. Call me a softie, but there's something about that makes sense to me. I don't think it's inherently crazy. I get it. And you can make an argument that much of the New Testament is formed in what we would call a pre-modern world, which looks a lot more like postmodernism than modernism. I have at least another hour of helpful thoughts there. Did I mention there's a class tomorrow night? Okay, so Sire in his book that we'll look at a little bit more tomorrow says this: postmodernists do not believe that reality is ultimately rational, knowable, or certain. They reject meta-narratives, i.e. the stories that are above the stories we live in, and question objective truth. Truth is relative, meaning is subjective, meaning is personal. You construct your own meaning. Are you hearing Disney songs in your head? You should be hearing Disney songs in your head. Let it go. Okay, so you don't have to hold on to what anybody tells you about who you are. If you have teenagers or children, if you're under the age of, let's say, 30 in the room right now, you're going, yeah, everything you're saying is obvious. If you're a little bit older in the room, you're going, I know, this is terrifying. I don't know what this is. This is freaky. I hear young people talk like this, and I'm like, what do you mean you don't even know who you are? This is crazy. So it's a serious clash of worldviews we're at a crux in right now in our cultural moment. So the key questions that we've looked at, let me look at those briefly, and then we'll take on some scripture. We've looked at this in relationship to every worldview we've studied. So here's basically, where did I come from? A postmodernist view would say, you came from culture, from family, and experiences. There's no universal story. Why am I here? Well, to find or construct my own meaning. That's why I'm here. I get to make my own meaning. I'm free from all these meta-narratives. What's wrong with the world? Society's oppressive, and there's no universal standard for right or wrong. That's what's wrong with the world. You're pretending as though there's some universal standard. So what's the solution? And this is the key: be authentic, explore perspectives, respect diversity. So the key is going to be what's going to make the world better is if we're truly ourselves and we're completely open to any and all different kinds of influences. Michel Foucault, famously through his life, he died in the 80s, actually of AIDS, because his entire work, his entire life was to take every drug, have every sexual experience, and take in every possible thing. So, as a postmodern philosopher, he embodied it. And, we might call it the YOLO philosophy. Okay. So where's it all going? What our future we create together? There's no grand narrative that controls it. Basically, what you're doing is writing your own script for your life. That's what you're doing. It's similar to existentialism in that it's separate, but it's different in that postmodernism is critical that even somehow you can even do that effectively. You need to be sort of a citizen of the world in a particular way and understand how everything works. It's flexible, it's tolerant. You'll hear the word tolerance a lot in our current cultural moment. And the tolerance is the key. Tolerance is what will enable us to love one another very effectively. You should be open to all kinds of new ideas, to flex what you believe, because what do you believe anyway? What do you really know? That kind of orientation is what's driving all kinds of things. Moral boundaries are blurred. And in the text that we just looked at, Jesus has an encounter where this question is asked directly. The text that we read in John 18, which I don't have adequate time to look through, but I'll point to briefly. Jesus has been arrested. He's moving toward the crucifixion. There's been effectively like a kangaroo court, a trial to convict him. And he's standing in front of this Roman official, Pilate, who would be an embodiment. I mean, ancient Rome actually looked pretty postmodern. There's lots of different, because it's pre-modern, there's a lot of different kinds of gods and different philosophies and influences. And Pilate's trying to make sense of who is this guy in front of him. Why did your own people put you in front of me and they want to kill you? And Jesus says some really interesting things. He says, your own people handed you to me. This is what he says. My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. You are a king then, said Pilate. You say that I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the, here it is, truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. And the line of all lines that rings forward in all postmodern philosophy is, what is truth? What is truth? Is there really a truth, or are there various truths? Often, what you'll hear a lot in our current cultural moment, if you talk about Jesus, is, that's good for you. But this isn't good for me. Almost like you're saying, I'm glad that you like raspberry ice cream, you weirdo. I like caramel ice cream. That's fine. That's what you like. This is what I like. And the logic of this just continues down. In many educational institutions we're in today, many professors and university academics would hold this view of postmodern truth, even as they're teaching. And what they believe as they teach is, I'm just trying to give you various ways of understanding so that you can grow to be an enlightened person. I'm not trying to give you a perspective. I'm just trying to give you a lot of ideas. I studied philosophy. I'm around different kind of philosophy stuff to this day. And I remember talking to this one professor and him saying, listen, and this is why it's important in light of what we talked about last week. I'll never forget this exchange. He says, Jay, the issue is we're talking about a Western versus an Eastern view of truth. See, as a Westerner, you believe that there's a right and a wrong, an up and a down, a true and a false. But an Easterner believes, there's various ways of understanding truth. And so that's a Western versus an Eastern view. It's not an either or. It's not a right or left. It's a both and, or maybe there's different possibilities. Doesn't that sound nice? To me, like, I don't know, does it? Okay, like it's it's just either or. It could be any. And I don't know. I've sat in philosophy classes. I've sat with younger folks, and they're spinning. They're like, well, so you say couldn't Jesus just be one of many things? And isn't it intolerant to believe that there's a way of truth and all that kind of stuff? And I'm talking to him, and you watch our whole class just spinning. Freshmen in philosophy classes are like dizzy. Like, okay, I don't know. I was raised in church my whole life, but I guess maybe I was dumb the whole time. And I remember. I'm 18 years old. I'm like, well, can I ask you a question? I don't think that holds up. He says, what do you mean that doesn't hold up? You're saying that it's not either or, it's both and like to say that's right or wrong is not fair, that you have to be open. He goes, yeah, exactly. And that's Western versus Eastern. I said, yeah. And it's just all the things. I said, yeah. I said, so you're saying that it's Western versus Eastern. And he went, yeah. I go, no, look at what I'm saying. You're saying it's either Western or Eastern. He goes, yeah. You're saying that I should tolerate and not be intolerant. Yeah, I said, what, do you see what I'm doing with my hands? Even what you're saying is either or. By saying it's both and, you're saying it's both and, not either or, which is either or. Okay, anyway, maybe you didn't see that. Okay, let me do it again. I'll do it this way. People will say, you know, religion is like 4 blind men with an elephant. Anybody ever heard this? 4 blind men with an elephant. One blind man has his hand on the trunk. The other has him on his leg. The other one's next to his body. The other one's near the tail. And the blind men are talking, what is an elephant? And the one blind man says, well, it's like long and robust, and you hold it. And the other one's kind of short and fat, and they're just holding the leg. And the other one's like, it's like more like a wall. And the other one says, well, it's more like furry and little. You can hold it in your hand. That's what. And they're like, oh my gosh, what is an elephant? And the deep philosopher says, see, it's just 4 different ways of seeing the same thing. See, there's 4 different views of the same thing. Doesn't that sound open and tolerant? Don't you understand, Jay? All these different religions are just seeing different kinds of the same thing. Here's the problem with that story. Somebody sees all the blind men. Somebody sees all the blind men and sees the elephant. There is still a perspective by which you see the whole. There is still a person saying, all you dummies are only seeing parts of it. That is the height of arrogance. That I'm going to look at every worldview, every religious view, and say, well, I'm smarter than all of you. You guys are so arrogant. You need to be more tolerant like me. That is the height of arrogance. And the truth is, nobody holds an actually postmodern view of this stuff. Nobody does. That's pretend. That's for the realm of philosophers. Everybody thinks somebody's stupid. Everybody thinks somebody's stupid. I mean, I was in philosophy class, and they'd be like, well, you know, all the views, and that's good for you, and that's good for me. Da, 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 da. I'm like, oh, cool, cool. I have a new religion. Here's my religion. I punch people in the mouth. That's what I do. That's how I worship God. And they're like, you know, that's good for you. Really? Step up. Well, you can't do that. That affects me. Oh, okay. New rule. You can have any view you want as long as you don't affect anybody. Yeah, well, guess what? You're affecting me now. So now I get to punch you. Okay, so like, this is crazy making. This is crazy making. I mean, listen. This is not Western or Eastern. Give me a break. I mean, even in India, when you're crossing the road, it's either the bus or me. It's not both. Like, the world doesn't work this way. The world is not designed this way. I get the orientation. I get why. I get the resistance to arrogance. I get it. I get it. I get that we want to be tolerant. I get it. And as a side note, what's fascinating is tolerance itself, the word itself, the definition has changed in dictionaries. Do you know that tolerance literally means to disagree and be kind anyway? That's what it means. That's what it should mean. But tolerance, the definition has changed to where you're just open to anything. If you can be open to anything, what is there to tolerate? If we agree, how am I tolerating you? Does this make sense? Tolerance, by definition, means we disagree. But we find a way to be gracious nonetheless. I agree with tolerance, but tolerance doesn't mean that I accept what you're saying as true. It means I disagree, and yet I still find a way to be kind and have dialogue. So the question isn't, is there truth? Of course there is. Of course there is. Everybody believes that. I mean, if I made up a religion and said to you, I have a religion, my religion is I take all the animals in the neighborhood and I sacrifice them in my backyard. I hope you wouldn't say, well, if that's good for you. I hope you would say, that's wrong. That's wrong. You can't do that. And not only can you not do that, you're going to pay a price for that. There's consequences for that behavior. That is wrong. At which point I would say, well, how do you know it's wrong? You don't get to tell me what's wrong. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. And inherently, the different worldviews and religious worldviews disagree. Now, do they have places of commonality? Of course they do. There are places there's agreement, but at the key salient points of discussion, there is not agreement, and it takes guts, and it takes courage, and it takes work, intellectually and otherwise, to make decisions about what is actually true. And don't get me wrong, I get it. In an intolerant world where people have been beat up, but I believe that faith, specifically faith that's found in Jesus, is like a microscope. It's vague, but it gets specific at a certain point. Different religious worlds have a lot of things in common. I agree. But here's what makes our faith in Jesus different. And it's different because of the dialogue he has with Pilate. It is different by the way Jesus represents himself. It's different for this reason. Jesus doesn't say, you should believe a set of truths and behave in a way that you live with those truths. He doesn't say that. He says, I am the truth. I am the way. I am the life. No religious teacher in the world ever stands up and says, just follow me. I have the way through. No one else makes the claims that Jesus makes. No one. Not Muhammad, not Buddha, nobody. Nobody claims, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. It's John 14:6. And John, as he's recording this dialogue with Pilate, of course is thinking about what he's just recorded a little bit earlier, which is he's saying, Jesus is claiming, I am the way, the truth, and the life. By the way, that dialogue in John 14 happens because he says, don't be afraid. I am going to my Father, and I will show you a way to him. And Philip, of course, speaks up and says, we don't know the way. We don't know where you're going. Thomas also says, how do we know the way? And Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. What you notice with Jesus is he's not going around trying to persuade people to believe a bunch of minute details. To be fair, we learn to believe things because we follow Jesus. But don't get it twisted. We don't believe a bunch of things, and that's our confidence. Our confidence is in the one who sent his son, who lived his life perfectly, who suffered and died on our behalf, and he rose again. The way we have confidence is not that we're smart. Thank God. It's not that we're smart. It's not that we're smarter than other people. It's not that we're more moral than other people. Our confidence is not in our ability to behave. Have you met Christians? Okay, have you met a few? Do you find yourself going, these are the most moral people I've ever met? Some of you are like, what's the right answer? The right answer is no, not necessarily. Now, hopefully you're growing in your Christ-likeness. But I don't know. As far as I understand what it means to be the church, to be followers of Jesus, we're the most tolerant people there are. We'll accept literally anybody. Like anybody. Like nobody's allowed to be rejected by the grace of God. We're the most tolerant people alive. Every other paradigm has like stipulations. We don't. Just look around. Just look around this place. There are tall people, there are short people. There are fat people, there are skinny people. There are smart people, there are dumb people. In this room and throughout the whole body of Christ, there are moral people. In this room, there are addicts. There are people that are lying to everyone around them. There are people that are mismanaging their money. There are people that are harming one another in this room right now. And what puts you in this room? That somehow you're better than someone else? No. What puts you in this room is the mercy of God that's found in Jesus Christ. That is all there is. He is the way. He is the life. He is truth. Truth is not a set of propositions. Truth is found in a person. And his name is Jesus. And he made a way. And this, my friends, is good news. What good news? What good news that is not up to you. This is the kind of news you should share. Listen, we're living in a current cultural moment where people are exhausted. They're trying to take in every piece of information. You're trying not to offend anyone. You're trying to have everything right all the time. And, oh no, there's like a new thing I'm supposed to learn about how like this one essential oil linked with this peptide might... Dude, it's wearying. The amount of information we have isn't helping. It's not helping. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For my burden is light, my yoke is easy. These are the words of the one who gave everything for you. He is worthy to be followed. He is worthy to yield the whole of your life. And I know I'm full of a bunch of people who have probably already done that. But hear me, you have to keep doing that. And be careful, Christians, because the reason postmodernism has grown up in the world is because Christians have been arrogant jerks. We should be the most humble people alive because we did nothing to deserve grace. And we did nothing. He set us free, and so we should be the most gracious, kind, and tolerant people, and yet we should be bold. Do not yield at the point of Jesus. Hold him up, offer him to the world. We are like beggars that have found bread. We just want all the other beggars to have some bread. That's who we are. But it's still real bread. And there still is a source for that, and his name is Jesus. Do you see the tension there? And we can be tolerant people in that, truly tolerant, in that we can be gracious with people because people need to know there's life that's truly life. We can be kind to them, but we must be bold and we must be clear. For this is the life that is truly life. Amen?